Welcome everyone, Costin here with my list of the best legendary lords in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires that originally were developed for Warhammer 1. This is something people have asked for, or rather this is something people have complained about because many of the lists I've done before have put the focus on Warhammer 2 legendary lords. Well, just how it is, they are generally the best legendary lords in the game. Some exceptions, of course, but by and large, Warhammer 2 legendary lords tend to be better than either the legendary lords from Warhammer 3 or the ones from Warhammer 1. With some exceptions, of course, things like Archaon or Ghrost, but by and large, there's a lot of powerful lords from Game 2. So in this one, I just want to talk specifically about the legendary lords that were created for Game 1. Though there is going to be an elephant in the room in this video, because I'm not quite sure how to tackle it, and that elephant is, of course, Orion. Orion is so far ahead of every other legendary lord in the entire game ever since they changed his faction, that it is not even funny to talk about it. The fact that this guy can get free upkeep for every single one of his armies by just declaring war on 25 factions means that he is nigh on unstoppable. Because the Wood Elves were already a very powerful race. And by giving Orion free upkeep, it means that he can get some of the best Elven units in the entire game, specifically Treekin, then Treemen, and maintain them for free. Now sure, he still has to pay for them, but when you're not having to pay upkeep, that means you have a substantially larger amount of money to play with. And that is Orion's situation. I think they certainly need to implement some kind of limit to this, because until they implement that limit, Orion is just going to be completely and utterly broken. At number 5, we have Balthasar Gelt. Gelt gets some pretty nice advantages. He does get 10 armor to all units, he gets hero capacity for battle wizards, and even upkeep for battle wizards. And then on top of that, in his own personal skill tree, he gives even more armor to his units. He gets more armor himself. He improves Pistoliers, Free Company Militia, Outriders, and Handgunners, which is very nice indeed. Although gunpowder units do certainly have quite a few issues. Luminarchs are not particularly great, though having 4 hero capacity to battle wizards can be worth quite a lot. But the real benefits of Gelt are his magic tree. Lorem Metal is pretty powerful. And then there is his starting position. Now, starting in the Empire is always a mess. Dealing with Imperial authority is never fun. But Gelt makes it work far better than Karl Franz. The reason he makes it work far better is that if you're not playing him, Karl Franz will start with the entirety of the Reichland, whereas if you're playing Karl Franz, you have to waste a couple of turns dealing with that. Gelt, on the other hand, although his province is nowhere near as good as the Reichland, his initial province only has one minor threat to deal with in these Black Venom Greenskins. Of course, you do also have the Skull Takers, who you should deal with pretty early on in your campaign. Like turn 2, you can deal with the Skull Takers, eliminate that threat, and then build up a vast and powerful army to take on Vlad and take out Sylvania. It is a hard fight, but if you manage your cards just right, you can take all of southern Sylvania and northern Sylvania very quickly, giving you a significant amount of economic power from which to grow. Furthermore, another significant advantage for Balthasar Gelt is he can colonize the mountains. So all of this territory that's near him, the Southern Grey Mountains, Sylvania, Carrick, Black Mountains, other territories as well, are all ripe for the taking. Being able to colonize more types of territory does give Gelt a pretty good advantage in his campaign. So if you want to play in an Imperial campaign right now, I would recommend Gelt, though I'd probably recommend the Hunts Marshal more, but from Warhammer 1 Legendary Lords of the Empire, he is currently the best. Volkmar's issues is that although Volkmar can become more powerful, it does take him a while to get to that position. One final thing to mention is that he does have great cannons that he starts with, which means he is able to win sieges far easier than the competition, or at least knock down the walls of settlements far easier. At number 4, we have Grombrindal, who is arguably one of the strongest legendary lords in the entire game when it comes to the faction effects that he provides, because he is a living ancestor. Though the downside, of course, is that he is a dwarven legendary lord. If not for the fact he was a legendary lord for one of the weakest races in the game, Grombrindal would be one of the best legendary lords in the entire game. So he does have the living ancestor effect, which can either give you an army benefit, a benefit to his own personal combat ability, a significant amount of casualty replenishment, actually some of the highest in the game you can get early on, along with control and corruption benefits, or a research and upkeep benefit. Valea's protection in particular makes up for many of the issues that the dwarves do have as a faction. Because you see, the dwarves do have heavily armored units, so they tend to do pretty well in auto-resolve. The problem is, they don't have great casualty replenishment, so whatever benefit they have in auto-resolve is not going to make up for that. You'll take significant casualties and you won't be able to replenish from them. But Grombrindal, with that 20% casualty replenishment rate, more than makes up for it, thus making his campaign the easiest campaign of any dwarven legendary lord, because you can just auto-resolve a lot of battles, win them easily, and get the steamroller going. On top of that, two of his grudges basically involve beating up Malekith, so fairly easy to accomplish. Then we have to talk about his skill tree. So he gets 15% campaign movement range from the Mountain Strider effect, as well as some army benefits. But when we talk about special skill tree, for Grombrindal, it's not the yellow line at the top here. Rather, it's the blue line. He gets recruit rank, recruitment cost, 15% extra campaign movement range, which stacks with Mountain Strider, 6% casualty replenishment, and global recruitment capacity. Making Grombrindal giving you through that blue skill line some of the most significant benefits of any legendary lord in the entire game. I mean, 15% campaign movement range for all characters faction-wide is probably the largest in the entire game. 15% recruitment cost for all units, free recruit rank, all very substantial, all very significant. If not for the fact that he is isolated and he is a dwarf legendary lord, as I stated, he would be one of the best in the entire game. His effects are just that ridiculous. His faction effects are not necessarily too substantial, so you can really benefit if you're playing, say, Thorgrim, and you confederate Grombrindal, which you can do, or you can acquire him by using a mod that gives you defeat a legendary lord. So when a dwarven legendary lord gets defeated, you can get access to them. Grombrindal tends to lose when played by the AI. When you are playing him, you can dominate significant sections of the map. And of course, he can acquire frozen territory, different types of territory, and utilize them. Being able to access the mountains in frozen territory allows him to expand more across the map than many other lords as well. Therein lies the power that Grombrindal has. And he also has a significant benefit to quarrelers in his own army, basically making them on par in terms of melee ability in a lot of ways to dwarf warriors. So not only are quarrelers a really good ranged unit, but with Grombrindal, dwarf warriors are only slightly above them in terms of melee combat ability. Mainly the charge bonus is the biggest difference, but outside of that, they're pretty damn good in terms of surviving at the very least in a melee fight. So you can just shoot at an enemy and then go into melee once you exhaust your ammunition. Grombrindal is a really strong lord, and yeah, he's a favorite clearly of Games Workshop in particular. At number 3, it is Azhag the Slaughterer for the Greenskins. The Greenskins are one of the most powerful races in the entire game, and Azhag certainly is one of the most powerful legendary lords. Not necessarily in terms of combat ability, Gringor is significantly more powerful, and Grom the Punch is the best legendary lord by far of the Greenskins due to his cauldron. But without the cauldron factor in, without the Warhammer 2 lords factor in, Azhag is, in my view, the best there is of the Greenskins because of his faction benefits. As I've mentioned, again and again, faction benefits are pretty important when determining strength. And it's also the fact that the strongest legendary lords are the ones that can expand the furthest and fastest on the entire campaign map. It's not just about, oh, who's the most powerful in a one-on-one fight. No, who's the guy who can conquer the entire map in a way no one else can. This is my empire at turn 51. Now, granted, I am abusing the Confederation mechanics of the Greenskins, where if you kill the faction leader in a battle of another Greenskin faction, you can take all their stuff. So, for instance, here I took out Skarsnik, got everything he had. I took out Grimgor, got Grimgor. That's what I've been doing in this particular campaign. But what are the benefits that make Azhag so powerful? Well, he gets 40 diplomatic relations, the vampire counts, and Archaon the Black. It will help keep Sylvania off your back. He does have a chance to get wyverns in all his armies, but the real benefits are the 20% research rate and 25% income from sacking settlements. Because it means when you are sacking a settlement, you will get a ridiculous amount of income every single settlement you are sacking. And that's the Greenskin playstyle. The Greenskin playstyle is you don't just take over a settlement. No, you burn it to the ground more or less, reduce it to level 1, and then you build it up back up again. You can do so very quickly because you've got really good growth. For instance, here in Red Peaks, I have 200 growth at the moment per turn. That is a fairly substantial amount of growth that you can get. So you burn it everything to the ground and then rebuild it from scratch. 160 growth in Ivory Road, 235. You get a ridiculous amount of growth. So getting a significant amount of income from sacking settlements will help that plan along, because it means you'll just have more money. Your income may not necessarily be the best as a greenskin, but that doesn't matter because you'll get so much income just from burning settlements to the ground, sacking settlements, and then taking them over. So Azhag really helps with that. And the research benefit means that you can get access to technology far faster than the other greenskin legendary lords. On top of that, you also get some benefits to orc biguns and orc units in general, melee defense, speed, base missile damage for orc archer boys and savage archer boys. He gets a benefit to shamans as well, hero capacity to shamans. And it's really that shaman benefit that does count for quite a bit. He doesn't get the recruitment from all provinces that Grimgor does have from very early on, but he does start with the shaman, so he does have a great deal of magical potential as well going for him. He's not the best fighter, he's not the best caster. In fact, I would not necessarily bother with his casting tree at all, but he does offer some fairly substantial campaign-wide benefits, and he can certainly hold his own in a fight as well. He's also got some decent enough items as well, more post-battle loot, income, control, local province, immune to vampiric attrition for Lord's army. Pretty decent amount of power available to him, and you can grow an empire like this very quickly on your campaign map and get the substantial amount of power going. So for instance here, I've got 2 entire stacks in the north. Over here I'm going to recruit more stacks, 2 more stacks to the south over here, or to the west really, another one over here to try and deal with Emmerich, though it's probably not going to be sufficient to deal with Emmerich in a one-on-one fight. And all of my settlements, a lot of my settlements are really maxed out, or they're in the process of being maxed out. So Azhag is powerful. He steamrollers the map in a way that the other greenskin lords in Warhammer from Warhammer 1 can't. Though he doesn't hold a candle to what Grom the Punch can do. Now, some people will ask, well, why not, Grimgor or Skarsnik? Well, Skarsnik is just pathetic in a melee fight, to be quite honest with you. Though he does get that significant goblin benefit, but at the same time, he's not really the best goblin lord either. Like, he's not the best in terms of leading goblins in a fight necessarily. a generic lord might actually be better when it comes to that, because there is the Goblin Tide, which gives them a significant amount of armor, which is pretty important, as opposed to the skill that Skarsnik does have. But Skarsnik, of course, does have that 40% upkeep benefit. The thing is, it's better as a greenskin to have a sacking benefit, a substantial sacking benefit, because that means more money in general, and it's not really the units, it's certainly not the goblin units that are going to consume the majority of your cash. Rather, it's going to be the buildings that you're going to want to construct. So having an income benefit to certain, or an upkeep benefit to certain units, is not really as significant as having an overall benefit to your income as a faction, which is what Azhag does certainly provide. So yeah, Azhag number 3 on this list. And number 2 is Helman Ghrost, the Lich King of Total War Warhammer 3. He was considered something of a joke of a legendary lord before, but now he is genuinely one of the strongest in the entire game by far. The reason is he gets a substantial benefit to zombies. He gets 10% casualty replenishment by default, which is pretty substantial when you think about it. Then he gets poison attack for zombies and skeletal units, which means that the units they're facing will deal less damage. And then, when we're looking at his Lord effects, he gets 30 armor in his own army to zombies and crypt ghouls, making those far more effective units than they are by default, vastly increasing their survivability and their value when auto-resolve. Ghrost himself is absolutely insane when it comes to the auto-resolve value, punching far above his weight. On top of that, he gets this skill line, which is just ridiculous when you look at it. So he's giving faction-wide zombies 12 melee attack, 10% ward save, a vast increase in battle healing cap, as well as Ever Onward, which gives them healing replenishment, or rather gives them the Ravenous Dead. So if they're in melee, they will replenish HP. And also gives them 50% weapon strength. So Ghrost will buff your zombies faction-wide by an absolutely ridiculous amount. And his own zombies will be incredibly powerful. And so Ghrost can paint this entire corner of the map in a way any other legendary lord that starts near him can. And he will be able to do so at a very low cost, because he is going to be able to recruit armies of zombies that will be very, very cheap. Like, for instance, by default, they are 90 free recruitment, but you can 90 free income, but you can reduce this even further, get to absurd levels of when it comes to zombies, and just throw 3, 4, 5, 6 zombie hordes at the problem. An army might be powerful, but it won't be able to stand up to the sheer tide of zombies that's heading their way. And even if they could potentially in a battle, when you're throwing 6 armies at the problem, it takes an incredibly potent enemy to be able to win that in auto-resolve, even on legendary difficulty. So therein lies the benefit of Ghrost. Now, to be fair, there are, of course, downsides. Zombies don't tend to do very well individually in auto-resolve, so you really do need to mass those numbers. But consider this is literally turn 1, and I've already got 18 units in this army. 18 units by default. There's absolutely nothing this minor Skaven faction will be able to do to stop me, and I can get even more units over here and throw more at the problem to deal with them. And I can also start recruiting a secondary army with more zombies, more and more zombies, more and more units to throw at the issue and conquer this entire mountainous region. Bring the ogres to their knees. That is the power of Helman Ghrost. Finally, at number 1, with the exception of Orion, of course, it is Archaon, the Ever-Chosen, the bringer of the end times. Archaon is insane in terms of the sheer power that he has available at his fingertips. So, for instance, just to understand, let's say we take the Riding Fortress over here. Occupy and vassalize. And now I have the ability to get a Hell Cannon. And also to get the Swords of Chaos Regiment of Renown. That is a pretty powerful starting army. Turn 1. This army, even if they attack, they're not going to be able to stand up to it. And I will just move him outside just in case. And that's the beginning. Archaon gets some very substantial benefits for each vassal he has. Vassals are pretty important for every single legendary lord of either the warriors or champions of chaos. But Archaon gets some of the most substantial benefits for vassals. Each vassal increases his research by 10%. Each vassal gives him 10 diplomatic relations to demons of chaos and warriors of chaos, beastmen, etc. And he also gets 25 souls. You can earn more souls than you are spending any single turn. And you do start with more gifts of Chaos Undivided, though you will have to work to unlock the specific gods. You're on a journey to earn the favor of the gods if you are playing as Archaon. But once you earn that favor, you become nigh on unstoppable. One of the key benefits, beyond having a lot of benefits to research, diplomatic relations, and souls for every vassal, is the fact that Archaon is surrounded by a bunch of factions, minor factions that you can easily vassalize. I mean, just look at the situation. There's a minor faction of Khorne, Slaanesh, Nurgle, and Marauders. That's already 4 factions. You can get 8, 10 plus vassals within, let's say, the first 20, 30 turns of your campaign. That means each of those vassals, especially on something like a legendary difficulty, is going to throw at least 1 stack of units against any problem you have. By the way, there's another vassal, like there's 5 vassals, because you can get the tongue here if you just take 1 territory in Bloodfire Falls. And Creative Assembly was like, oh, Warriors of Chaos are not powerful enough with vassalization. Let's allow them to forcefully vassalize human factions. What that means is you reduce them to their last settlement, and when you do reduce them to their last settlement and you take it, you can force vassalization on them. So I can vassalize Boris Ursus, for instance, the Demon Prince, others. As Archaon, you can also force confederations on other Warriors of Chaos legendary lords. What I mean by force confederation, instead of forcing vassalization when you take the last territory a faction has, for instance, if I were to go over here where Kolic is and were to take his capital, I could force a confederation on him where I gain him as a legendary lord under my control. And that is a significant amount of power. Archaon himself doesn't necessarily have the greatest skill tree in the entire world, but the skill tree, although having capacity for exalted hero is certainly nice to have, but the skill tree doesn't matter when you have such potent faction-wide benefits in research, diplomatic relations, and souls. Research obviously means you're going to get the tech tree unlocked much faster than anyone else. The souls means that you're going to be able to get more demonic units than anyone else, and get more faction benefits that you will be able to keep up for much longer in your campaign than any other legendary lord from the Warriors of Chaos, which are already one of the best factions, or one of the best races in the entire game. So Archaon, number 1. Or rather, Orion, number 1, but he's pretty broken at the moment. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.